Heard from Councillor Castro, so we won't apologise for him just yet either, unless someone else has heard anything from Councillor Castro. No? Okay. Welcome to the Water, Waste and Energy Committee meeting, Wednesday 14th of July, number 805. And can we welcome visiting councillors, Councillor Owen Jones, Councillor Gates and Councillor Pauline Young. And we have Councillor McDonald on Teams. Are you there, Councillor McDonald? Councillor McDonald? Can see you, can't hear you. She has. Councillor McDonald? Oh, okay. You're there with us?
I wonder where you were.
No, we just started late, still waiting for Councillor Castro and Councillor Hamill, who are both running late, but we're going to start. So welcome to the meeting. We might just start by confirming the minutes from the last meeting, unless anyone's got any corrections. No? Proposed by Councillor Tozer, seconder for confirmation of minutes. Councillor Peter Young. All those in favour? That's carried. Any conflict of interest declarations, councillors? I haven't received any. Director, you haven't received any? No. We have several starred items and we have some presentations today, councillors. Would anyone like to unstar any of the starred items? Well, okay. You can unstar. 6. Welcome, Councillor Castro. So unstarring 6. Anyone want to unstar any of the others? I think I might unstar 9 just for a quick question when we go into closed. So we have items 3, 4, 5 and 7 starred. Would someone like to propose those? Councillor Peter Young, seconded Councillor Tozer. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. We're going to item 6, councillors.
Thanks, Chair. Part of my questioning is to do with with the street and park bin services and that, and where we were looking at recycle bins for the parks at one stage, and the initial project was going to be in public place recycling expansion in Burleigh, and now it's on hold. So you can undertake a review. Now, just my thoughts on this are that since COVID, we have so much more demand on our parks recycling because there's just everything's in disposable containers now, and I would imagine that without any recycling bins in those really busy areas, we're actually sending a lot more to landfill, and I was just wondering why we weren't progressing that sort of thing. Just a thought, and especially in our areas our restaurant areas where people are, and you just see the bins are overflowing with cardboard.
I'll probably reiterate that to Director, because the rollout was supposed to come down to Coolangatta as well.
Yeah.
Through you, Madam Chair, it hasn't been placed on hold. We're simply working through a number of the challenges with public place recycling. Mm-hmm. One of the challenges is, to be honest, simply the cost and the arrangements. As soon as you put a recycling bin at a location, you actually then just simply double the service, because we have our current city maintenance trucks go around and collect the waste bins. As soon as you put another bin there, we have to have a separate truck come around and do the same sort of route. So it's that sort of logistics in the first place that we have to work through with city maintenance, which is really the biggest challenge for us, particularly in those areas where city maintenance still actually provides those services, which is pretty much always east of the Gold Coast Highway. West of the Gold Coast Highway, JJ Richards collects the recycling services in parks, and there's, to be honest, a lot more capacity to be able to do that. We're also trying to work through, we have a very inconsistent approach to public place recycling and bin sets across the city at this point in time, and that's simply a historical legacy, for want of a better description, of how some schemes have been put into place. And many of you will be aware that in some places we have simply, for example, a galvanised post, and we have a red bin on one side and we have a yellow bin on the other side. But in some of our more prominent parks, like for example at Burleigh, the bins are actually within placements, the wooden and stainless steel placements, which have no indication of whether they're recycling or waste bins underneath those. So again, we're continuing to work through it. We're looking at a range of options, how we can do this cost effectively. So while it's parked at this point in time, it is still very much on our agenda to see how we can expand and bring it further. I think one of the other final things to say is, unfortunately, a lot of the cardboard packaging that gets used with takeaways in parks is not highly desirable from a recycling perspective. Our recyclers, because it's often highly contaminated with food stuffs, and even pizza boxes, often just have oil and residue in it. So from a recycling perspective, it actually is not selected for recycling, a lot of that material. But we're well aware that, and we saw it since the start of COVID, a number of our bin services in a number of locations, we've had to increase the servicing of them because of the increase in the utilisation of those parks and the increase in the utilisation of takeaways.
And I think, through the chair, if that's right, the other thing I've noticed is, being out early in the day, is the number of people that are actually going out and going through the bins now and collecting all the bottles and the tins that they can actually get their 10 cents for each. So that used to be a sporadic thing, but now there's not a day of the week that I go out trotting rather than running, but that I don't see people going, and it's, not more than, it's half a dozen in the distance that I do, different people going through it. So obviously the increase is there because they're cashing in on it. So it's the demand for, and I would have to say, waste-wise, it's probably one of the biggest requests we get through the Division 12 office is, why don't we have some sort of recycling in our public parks? And also we get feedback from, like Pizzey Park and things like that, the bigger sporting grounds, where now that everything's disposable, so it's nice to know that it's not on hold, but it's, it's a question that I think I've probably asked for 3 or 4 years now. Yeah.
Look, again, you're absolutely right. In the previous work we did on the waste strategy, part of the community feedback, and the highest level of community feedback and support was for increased public place recycling. But as I say, the logistics and the challenges of how we actually achieve recycling in those locations is not easy.
Okay.
But we certainly haven't dropped it. The guys are working absolutely on it, and when we feel we've got a sound approach that, as I say, gets a consistent picture and is cost effective and can be serviced without increasing substantially our maintenance fleet, we'll certainly be coming back with that.
And is that something that's, sorry, Chair,
Yeah.
is that something that's identified with, like we're going out to a new contract? That's something that's sort of sitting fairly high on that agenda there, that if we do have that increase?
Absolutely. In fact, that's that's where the real opportunity is. If we can get this, our proposal right, we will include that in our collections contract, and we'll certainly be coming back to committee with a number of proposals that we'd like to include in the new collections contract to advance a number of these things.
Thank you.
I think Councillor Gates, you were next, and then followed by Councillor Tozer.
Thanks, Chair. The Director actually touched on the question that I'd written down, which was whether we had any statistics on the level of contamination in public place recycling, given the food scraps that might remain in the disposed of product.
Yeah.
So quite clearly you do have done some work on that.
We have, and as I say, it's very challenging, and people who want to do the right thing want to see public place recycling. Unfortunately, we don't see great outcomes from that space. And generally, your best achievements are collecting your containers, as Councillor Young said, your glasses and your cans, but they are now extremely popular for people to come and remove and cash up. So that's another challenge that we're trying to work through. How do we get that right balance?
Thank you. Councillor Tozer.
Can cardboard be composted?
Yes, for a large extent, absolutely.
So if someone has a compost bin at home, we put food scraps in it. Can we put kind of newspaper and? Is that recommended or not recommended, or can I get some advice about that? I'm just trying to work out, because I kind of note the commentary around cardboard being put into recycling and contaminating recycling, but could it be put into green waste, or could it be put into food organics, or could it be put into a home compost option?
Look, I don't want to leave the wrong impression. We absolutely want recycling of cardboard at the home. What I'm saying is, generally in public place recycling, when the majority of paper or cardboard products comes from the fish and chip shop or the pizza shop, often those products are contaminated and aren't highly desirable from a recycling perspective.
And I get that, but I'm trying to work out from a consumer's point of view, like in my house, pizza boxes. That's not that we eat a lot of pizza, but we have pizza. We do have fish and chips. We probably do get a bit of takeaway. They get served in these cardboard things, and I've always cleaned them out and chucked them in the cardboard recycling.
So keep doing that, but do not change doing that.
But it occurs to me that if there's food scraps in it, it does contaminate it. Is compost an option or a recommended option?
Not generally. It's recommended from a home composting. If you want to do that, that's okay. But we don't want to, when we move to a organics or a food and organics, we do not want cardboard in that service or that bin. The cardboard should, either you can do something yourself at home, but the cardboard should go in the yellow bin.
What about newspaper?
Newspaper should go in the yellow bin as well. But again, newspapers are very low quality paper, but it should go in the yellow recycling bin.
Okay. There you go. There's a tip. We should do an info sheet for people that we can share on our social media and start talking about things you can do at home. And
we'll check our data.
Little things like that.
Pretty sure we've got that information available, but we'll check.
I've got you. I've got you on that. What about the ash from fireplaces? Should that just be buried in the ground, or what should it?
We'll get our list of things and we'll share it. But if you've got other ideas, we'll make sure we cover them on the list and information.
That'd be great. Thanks, Rod.
Throwing up more questions and answers, Councillor Tozer.
Well, that's my job. That's
That's
all
your
our job. Our job is to ask good questions.
Councillor Hamill, followed by Councillor Owen-Jones.
Chair, I was only going to add a little bit onto that about the packaging stuff. That's why moving to biodegradable packaging is such a big push, because even when you do recycle cardboard, we don't actually have the capacity in most places of Australia to actually repulp it and reuse it. It's still too cheap to use virgin cardboard. So the future will be that most of your cardboard packaging will be from, say the stuff you get your Guzman Gomez in is actually made from sugarcane pulp. as a byproduct and is fully compostable. So you won't see in the future recycled cardboard going back into fresh cardboard necessarily. It'll probably all end up in composting in the future. Just need that to come along a little bit faster, which I don't know how far in the future we're off about some of the other stuff that the city's getting involved in, but we're at the forefront of a couple of those things in conjunction with some universities at the moment.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Owen Jones.
I saw recently that there's a new app that's coming that I think is going to be nationally released in regards to what can and can't go into bins, and I think that what the city is wanting to make sure is that the material that goes into our recycling bins follows that and is not contaminated, able to be sorted, because ultimately there is material that is recycled and we get paid for it by volume. So if it comes into our waste stream and is clean and not contaminated, ultimately the city will get some value from that. And when we get value from that, it drives down the need to actually increase our charge on our rates. So my guess is that's maybe why the director was somewhat reluctant in regards to what can and can't go into a compost bin, because we actually need to be on the same message in regards to what is the good stuff that goes into the bin, and without complicating it as to what should go into composting. But my guess is, through the chair to Councillor Tozer, is if you ask Councillor Vorster through the lifestyle community, he'll give you a very long answer as to what are the good things that should go into compost, because I think that's...
Thanks, Councillor. But just before we take the vote on item 6, I'll probably just finish off, because I represent the southern end of the city, which is close to the New South Wales border. Tweed has been ahead with the recycling bins in public places for quite a while, so I do get the request, especially around the Coolangatta CBD area and the beach areas there that are very popular, that when are we doing this? So glad to hear that it's still not on hold, so thank you.
I'm wondering, Chair, have Tweed Council admitted where their recycling from their public places goes?
Not that I know of.
Well, that would be an interesting question for those residents to put back to Tweed Council, because I know where their public place recycling goes.
Interesting. Okay, would someone like to move item 6? Councillor Peter Young. Seconder, Councillor Tozer. All those in favour? And that's carried. Councillors, we have some confidential items on grey paper, items 8, 9 and 10. I'll just let you know the reason for going into close for procedural motion. Item 8, it's a local government budget issue and negotiations relating to a commercial matter involving the local government for which a public discussion would be likely to prejudice the interest of the local government. Item 9, resource recovery services update, industrial matters affecting employees. It's also a local government budget issue and negotiations relating to a commercial matter involving the local government for which public discussion would be likely to prejudice the interest of the local government. And item 10, recycle water scheme support. It's a local government budget issue. There's rating concessions to be considered, and again, negotiations relating to the commercial matter involving the local government. Anyone want to move that procedural motion that we go into closed? Councillor Hamill, and seconded by Councillor Tozer. That's carried. Streaming. You can turn on the streaming.
Okay.
Okay, streaming on.
Take two.
For
Dav's microphone.
yeah, Councillor McDonald, are you there? We're back into open now.
I am.
Okay. Just for those who are viewing, we're actually having a non-confidential presentation, and it's just about our strategic planning update. And you may note the slide on the screen talking about capacity of our sewage treatment plants. Just the capacity and the current load and the future load of 2066, and that will be made available to the public. You can continue presentation. Thanks, Kathy.
Yeah, so as Councillor just said, or the Chair just mentioned, all of our STPs have capacity at the moment, and we plan for at least 50 years, with a number of our STPs having upgrades coming up in the next 10 years.
Thank you.
So this is Pimpama STP, and as I was saying, we upgrade our STP routinely, and so as you can tell, PA1 transfer, for example, will allow us to buy some more years in the Pimpama STP, which will then put stage 2 out to, and I can't read that, 2028. And then a future stage around 2030, 2042, all depending on load when it comes in. And obviously, you know, there's capacity. If that area grows, we can actually add additional stages after that. But based on our current planning, stage 3 is what will get us through to the full 2066 city plan population projections and industrial commercial projections.
So just to, sorry, Kathy, just to highlight, you know, clearly this is just simple intersection of lines that says our current capacity will hit at 2028. And as Kathy said, that'll depend on what actually happens or not. But 2028 is when we need stage 2 to be built and up and operating. So, you know, a decent augmentation will take 2 years to construct, you know, a year before that to design. So, you know, when you come back on that, it's about 2023, 24 that we would be, you know, seriously designing, planning, and you know, 2025 or 6, starting to spend significant amount of money to actually get it online for 2028.
So this just gives you an overlay of where stages can go in the STP. And as I was saying, whilst we only have stages 1, 2 and 3, as you can see, we've actually identified up to stage 5 if needed. And that would only come on board if the population projections increased, or the load increased, or we took the sewage from the Stapleton catchment back down into the Pimpama catchment. But as you can see, like we're also looking to do intensification in future stages, and intensification basically means treating more sewage in the same structures, because you can't keep building more structures because all of our STP sites are constrained to a particular size, and so you basically use what you've got and intensify and make them be able to work harder to process the sewage. So on to Kumavar, our biggest plant. So Kumavar obviously has a lot more stages because it has the biggest area it services. And as you can see, we're currently building stage 6 at the moment, and we'll be able to take the PA1 transfer, and we'll need to start thinking about building stage 7 around 2030. Again, depending on where we're at, whether we transfer PA1 back to Pimpama before we build the next stages. But we've just, in this particular graph, we've included that PA1 transfer can continue to go to Kumavar, but as I said, we pull levers, we'll send it back the other way to push Kumavar out. There's other levers we can do within the treatment plant to defer or push back or delay the upgrades.
Is the strategic plan you've talked about here, is it fully funded in the 4-year capital works? Like, are we talking today about something we've actually made provision for, or
it's in our 10-year plan?
Right. Okay.
So it's in the council's financial sustainability model. It's also in our LGIP and our water and sewage infrastructure plan.
Yep.
As you know, Gold Coast water and waste is sort of semi-ring-fenced in terms of dollars. So yes, we would have it in our 10-year plan fully funded for all of the upgrades for 10 years.
Okay, so everything in the next 10 years is adopted in our budgets, and the strategic plan you're presenting today is effectively a fully funded strategic plan.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So just in regards to that Kumavar sewage treatment plant graph, am I correct in saying that we still have existing capacity with stage 5?
Yes, a small amount of existing capacity. What did I tell you it was? About 5,000 EP.
And we've had no overflow of any of the Kumavar stages?
We've had no overflow of raw sewage.
Yep.
We do occasionally get overflows when there's excessive rain, and I mean like the Q100 type events, 1 in 100 events, where we can't pump it out quick enough to the seaway.
Yeah, so but we've had no recent events, and
No.
And the construction of stage 6 is now well advanced and hasn't caused any issues in that space.
No, yeah, construction of stage 6 is well advanced. We've sunk our 1,000 piles for the structures. We've now, if you went out there, we've got heaps of walls up, which are pretty cool to look at. And there's been no issues in terms of treatment of our current load coming into Kumavar.
So, sorry, construction of stage 6 occurs completely separate from the existing plant operations, so there's no impact whatsoever.
I suppose the rationale behind the questions is to demystify some of the urban myth that might have turned up in the last couple of weeks in regards to the mangroves in the Kumavar wetland, and that coinciding with construction at stage 6, which is being conflated together. So in regards to Kumavar's spare capacity at the moment, so 4,000 or 5,000 equivalent people, what does that equate to roughly in regards to residents?
4,000 equivalent people, it's probably about 40% commercial, so you'd take that off, so what's that, 40%, so that's what, 3,000 EP, which would then equate to, if you divide that by 2, and 2's not quite the number, but it's easy for me to work out, that's 1,400 houses.
Yeah,
or so.
And what is the timing of stage 6 being online?
That's the hidden question.
It will be the end of next year.
End of 2020.
Finishes end of 2022, as per that graph, which when we required it. But I think it's important to say treatment plants are not, they don't hit a wall in terms of capacity. There's not a magic number and then suddenly everything's broken.
Yep.
And as we discussed before, we have some extremely talented operators in our systems, and as we've regularly said, whenever we have any consultants come and do work on our treatment plants, they're continually amazed at how well and what great performance we get out of our treatment plants that far exceeds, in theory, what they should be able to do. So, as I say, there's no hard wall coming up that, on this date, that the treatment plant's suddenly in trouble. but we're well on our program, and as I say, to commission the treatment or the next stage of the treatment plant by the end of 2022, as was predicted.
And just a final question. So clearly today you're talking about a plan that takes the entire city out notionally to 2066 to tie in with the South East Queensland population targets delivered by our state government. In regards to stage 6, when would have the initial designs have commenced? Like, I mean, so was it 2 or 3 years ago, or was it 5 or 10 years ago? I'm interested in giving the residents some comfort in the fact that clearly you've got a long 50-year plan for capacity, but like, I mean, that 5% headroom that we've got in capacity is something, that's how you run your business. So we don't actually build and have a spare 30% capacity, because that's got to be funded by ratepayers. So I'd be really interested in knowing when the original designs started being created for stage 6 as a way of explaining to people that 2 or 3 or 5 year tail of design that's required.
Look, exactly as you said, our purpose is to build what we say just in time. When the capacity is needed, we deliver it when the additional capacity is needed. But like I said, that's not a hard line. It's a theoretical curve. We would have started planning this several years ago. That the first stage of planning is what do we think we're going to build, what sort of technology is currently available. Ryan is a process engineer, that's what he specialises in. He looks at the globally, and we examined a number of technologies globally when we commenced this, and as I said, this was probably 7 years ago. Doing a technology scan of what is our best option for upgrade of this treatment plant. That underwent a number of investigation studies till when we land on the technology.
Yep.
We then actually commence preliminary design. Now that would have been 5 years ago. Yep. 4 or 5 years ago, we settle on that, and then we take the next stage of saying, yes, how are we going to actually deliver this? Is it a design and construction? Do we do the design first and separately, and then go out for a tender, et cetera, et cetera? So as we're building this, and as you can see, while we're constructing stage 6, we've got the schematics and areas identified for the next stage. So you can see, 3 blue dots. We've already figured out what technology we want to do for stage 7 at this point in time. Yet that's another 10 years down the track. Now we'll, in 5 years' time, revisit our thinking for stage 7 and go through that whole process again. So we don't leave anything to chance. As you say, this is a well thought out and extensive process.
And the other thing I'll reiterate is we do this every 5 years. We look at the flows coming into the plants, not just the predicted population, but what is actually coming in, the strength of what's actually coming in to help us make our decisions. And Water and Sewerage has been doing this sort of stuff for 50 years. I could pull out a 1978 report, and you'll probably see a design shortly from about 1992 down in Eleanor, which basically says this is what I think we need to build in X number of years' time, because we just keep rolling it out, re-looking at it, looking at the timing, looking at whether technology's changed, looking at whether concentrations have changed, and then going forward.
I'd make a Dawn joke, but she's not here.
No. Yeah, so as Paul said, you can see that we've got a number of stages already identified on this one as well. And as I said, all our sites are constrained, so future stages will end up having some intensification process for us to continue to treat sewage well past the 50 years that we currently plan for. Mary Mac? So again, similar story. So you asked about the $20 million. That's like little stages 1 and 2 plus the dewatering. This is just looking at treatment capacity, not dewatering. So you won't see the dewatering component in there. You'll just see the actual process component, the biological processes components and the costs in this slide. So as you can see, we're going to decommission 1 and 2 later on, and then decommission 3 because we'll build bigger structures and newer structures because those structures are quite old and aren't conducive to intensification processes. So they will get taken out and better civil put in.
So I think, Kathy, and this is a great example you saw on the Kumavar before, is just these steps up. Merrimack is now, we're constrained on that site and we have to take a step up and then take a step back because we have to decommission some existing infrastructure, therefore we lose capacity, but then we build new infrastructure over the site of that decommissioned infrastructure. So the diagram gets more complicated. And again, you can see the B49 transfer that we've built some, again, levers in the network that we can transfer flows between this plant or that plant to stage and get better outcomes across the city. We can't do it with everything, but it gives us some flexibility and optimisation.
And that's the rough layout and that's going forward. So those of you who know Merrimack at the moment, you'll think, that little spot, I can't even do it. Where's stage 6? Isn't that where the green waste pad currently sits? Yes, it is. The green waste pad will be moving off that site very shortly, and that's where stage 6 will eventually go. And as part of the recycled water network expansion, you'll see a little yellow. That's where the recycled water treatment plant will go for the Class A treatment for the Carrara scheme. And that treatment plant is at a size for the current scheme, but it can be upsized and modularised and taken in bigger steps as that scheme grows.
Environment Science approvals for all of these stages?
Yes and no. There'll be approvals for construction activities and potential approvals for intensification. So the rules around STP approvals have changed. It used to be if you increase the capacity by 10%, then you had to go back in and get an approval. That's changed now, and they look at it's either 10% or it's increased potential for harm or a number of other things. So myself and my team make those assessments as to whether that needs a full approval or just a minor amendment. We have to definitely do minor amendments because we have noise conditions and odour conditions on our treatment plants, and they're very tight, and construction activities with piling will make it so we cannot achieve those conditions. So I actually go back in and get an amendment for piling noise and truck noise, just like what we did at Kumavar.
And so is that an environmental authority?
Yes.
Thank you.
And here's the poor little Eleanor plant, and those of you who haven't been down there recently, this gives you a good look at what TMR have done to our little site. A number of trees have obviously been removed from the site, and you'll even notice that their laydown area is actually coming into the STP lot that's there as well. Yes.
Yes. Darbucker Creek Road is the one on the left-hand side.
Yes. Really? So, yeah. So as you can see, yeah. Make sure you're
Just out of shot.
You're just out, yeah. So as you can see, this site is very constrained. We've got the river on either side. We've got some nice trees, and then we've got obviously the M1 expansion, the service road, which the city is going to put in as part of this M1 expansion, and then heavy rail to come into the land in front of our site. So this is the current plan for Eleanor based on the population projections that we've had. So as you can see, as Paul said again, decommissioning some reactors, refurbishing some, doing an upgrade, decommission upgrade. So you'll see the zigzag pattern again on the capacity on this treatment plant.
Yes, Councillor Hamill.
Just, you've brought up the constraint issue a few times, and even though the graphs show that even with the current constraints, we've got well and true capacity to 2066. But I'm interested in that global kind of scan of technology evolutions and whatnot. Are there systems around the world where pre-treatment off-site before it reaches the actual main treatment plant, is that increasing? Like thinking of that Stapleton will be a pre-treatment of possible industrial sewage before it came through the plant because of how corrosive and whatnot it is. But is that something that can happen in smaller packages before it goes into these other constraint sites?
Yeah, there's a number of different ways that can occur. We can have decentralised schemes for bigger developments. So, for example, if PVE or whatever it's called now, Sky Ridge, could have, for example, set up its own treatment plant, little package treatment plant, bit like Currumbin Eco Village has done, and treat their sewage to a degree, and then it could come into our system and or just be released to the environment. The other things around future technology scans is the intensification process. So whilst it's constrained, you can actually get novel nutrient removal technologies which we can add into the existing structures that we have on our plants to basically make it treat more sewage.
So really, you keep saying constraints, but really don't probably have a constraint.
It's land constraint.
Yeah, but
yeah. So if we continue to build the way we have traditionally built, we wouldn't be able to service the growing city.
But that
so you rethink and look at what's available out there in the world and what's proven in Australia, because it might work in Holland, but they don't get the temperatures between 19 and 35 like we do here in the city. They're very, very low temperatures. So we actually have to look at all those considerations when we're looking at any new nutrient treatment. And that's Ryan's job and his partners that we have. We have a number of partners we work with who are into knowing innovation and research development, and they have partner companies worldwide which they draw on to then help us in our process.
Thank you, Chair.
Just before you go on, I'll just check if Councillor McDonald has any questions. Councillor McDonald, have you any questions about Eleanor treatment plant?
No, I'd just like to thank the officers for bringing this forward, and that's being done. This is on the projected DP on the current planning scheme, is that right, on version 7
Yes.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, just to add further to that technical discussion, as Kathy said, the issue is about land, and if you decentralise, you've still got to find somewhere to place those plants.
It was more out of interest, Director, and I was more getting to that. I know package plants in other councils that are even more constrained than us, that when the existing mains network couldn't handle it as part of a development, they'd have to put in a package plan. I knew it wasn't. It was just more out of interest of if there was stuff like that coming, but I get it. We're cool. We've got capacity to 2,100.
Yeah. So as I was saying earlier, we planned like this for years, and this current or this picture I've got up there now was the master plan from about 1995 for Eleanor. And so as you can see, there's some nice structures up to the north of the plant, which happen to just fall into where TMR have currently taken some land. And I'm going to use the A word that, we don't really like, but back in the day, the City of Gold Coast and Water and Waste owned both lots, but when All Connects came along, we subdivided, and the existing footprint lot All Connects got, and the remainder stayed with the city. And then when we've come back, we were planning to use what was left, but there was a bit of kerfuffle and widening of roads that we didn't realise that were being widened, and so we get to this stage where that's the land resumption that they've currently taken, which essentially wipes out, you know, a bit of our plan, which made us have a rethink of how we have to do our treatment plant down in this area. So as I showed earlier, stage 2 is around $65 million in the next 5 years, and then stage 3 is later. Once TMR gets off the rest of the site, they actually are going to give some land back to us once they've finished all their work and worked out how much they can give back. Originally they were going to take the lot, but we had a Barney.
Councillor Owen Jones.
And so there's this relatively close proximity of houses on that northern side. Is that the closest that we have approved houses to sewer treatment plants?
Yes, so this Eleanor is the one with the most close. From the head of works to the left, and the city has allowed a subdivision on one of these lots on this side. It's about 167 to 190 metres to the head of works for these ones. A little bit further to the north, but yes, this is our closest.
And do we have, is there odour issues with the proximity?
Yes, you will have seen or approved back in 2015 when the scheme came up to you for the first round of city plan. You would have noticed that there was buffer overlays in those plans which have a kilometre buffer, which is what we would like around STPs. Each STP is different depending on the size, but we would like a kilometre. So we have a buffer around these plants which has the kilometre. Unfortunately, we can't kick people out, but we can try and stop intensification or reduce the number of people coming into those buffers. So each treatment plant has a buffer around them.
And sorry, final question in regards to the environmental authority. Are they separate environmental authorities for each of the sites?
We have one environmental authority which covers all of the sites. So, but each have a different
different criteria.
Different criteria, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And that was it.
Any other questions?
Just keep pulling them levers.
So,
Thank you very much,
so
Karen. That was really insightful.
just before she...
know that we've got a 50-year plan, 10-year capital works plan that's fully funded, and we refresh our 50-year plan every 5 years. So I'm very happy to hear all that. Councillor Tozer.
While we're in open, are you okay with us resolving the matters that were in open before we go back into close for the waste modernisation presentation? I just have to leave. I have to leave the meeting.
Yeah,
so,
that's no problem at all. And I think after we do that, we might go back into close and then just take a 5-minute break and come back for the other presentation. That's okay with everybody? Okay.
Could I just ask a question of the officers, though, while you're there?
Yeah, sure.
Between the 90 and 95 EP, how many homes would pay it?
So the 90 to 95,000 EP.
Yes.
There's 5,000 EP. You put 2.5 EP to a home. So that's roughly 2,000 homes.
2,000.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, councillors, we're going back to item number 8. Flexi skip service. That wasn't proposed by me, I don't think, was it? It was.
Yeah,
yes, it was. I proposed it and seconded Councillor Peter Young. All those in favour? That's carried. Item 9. Moved by Councillor Hamill and seconded by Councillor Peter Young. All those in favour? That's carried. And item 10. Moved by Councillor Peter Young, seconded by Councillor Glenn Tozer. Recycle Water Scheme support. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. And I'll move a procedural motion to go into closed. Could I have a seconder? Oh, yes.
A motion that confirms that presentation will be made as part of the minutes. Yeah, I reckon you do. You do or you don't?
I didn't think you did, but we can. Yeah.
If the chair will accept it, I'll move that the presentation be made
As
non-confidential.
Be
Well,
attached to the minutes.
attached to the minutes.
strategic
It's already
STP
non-confidential.
planning update.
Yeah, if it could be attached to the minutes, proposed by Glenn Tozer, seconded by me. Thanks. Yep. All those in favour? It's carried. And I'm going to move us into close. Someone second that? Councillor Tozer second. We'll just have a short break for 5 minutes. We'll come back for the presentation. Thanks. Councillor McDonald. Is the streaming on? Okay. Back into open. Any general business, councillors? No? Declare the meeting closed at 6 minutes past 12.